We often wait for life to speak to us in a roar. We look for the grand epiphany or the undeniable sign that tells us exactly where to go. But have you ever noticed those quieter moments? A sudden stray thought about a book you haven't read in years, a faint impulse to take a different route home. Most of us dismiss these as mental noise or simple distractions. We push them aside because they don't look like progress. They don't feel loud enough to be important. Yet there is a hidden rhythm to these small, flickering interests. When we ignore them, the day feels heavy and stagnant. When we follow them, the world seems to open up in ways logic cannot explain. It appears that the most significant shifts in our reality are triggered by the signals we are most likely to overlook. We have all felt those days where every green light hit, every conversation sparkled, and every door seemed to open before we even knocked. In those moments, life feels light, almost as if we are being carried by an invisible current. But just as quickly, the wind can shift. Suddenly, tasks feel like uphill battles. Simple plans fall apart. We find ourselves pushing against a world that feels heavy and unresponsive. Why do these shifts happen so suddenly? We often blame luck or timing, but this pattern appears more often than we realize. There is a subtle consistency to these cycles of flow and friction. It suggests that we might be misinterpreting the very nature of our daily impulses.
Most of us have been taught to look for the big map, yet we consistently overlook the compass already in our hands. Watch closely, because the mechanism behind this is far simpler than most people imagine, and once you see it, the signals become impossible to ignore. Have you ever noticed how some days feel like they were scripted in your favor? You think of a person, and they call. You have a specific question, and the answer appears on a random billboard or in a passing conversation. We usually call this having a good day or simply luck. But then the pattern shifts. You start forcing a project that isn't moving. You ignore a tiny hunch to stay home and end up stuck in a chain of frustrations. Suddenly, the world feels resistant, as if you are swimming against a heavy tide. This is the strange consistency many people notice but rarely question. These shifts from effortless flow to grinding friction don't actually seem random. They repeat across different years, different jobs, and different relationships. When we look closely, the timing of these moments often aligns with the smallest impulses we chose to follow, or the ones we decided to ignore. The repetition begins to reveal something deeper than mere chance. It suggests that these experiences aren't just happening to us. They are responding to a signal we are constantly broadcasting without realizing it. This is where the experience begins to make sense. We are taught to view excitement as a mere emotional peak, a temporary high that comes and goes. But in this perspective, excitement is something much more functional. It is a biological translation of a signal from your deeper self. Think of it as a highly sophisticated navigation system. When you feel that tiny, quiet pull toward a specific task or a simple conversation, you aren't just feeling a whim, you are receiving a message of alignment. This reveals something important about how reality works. The sensation of excitement is actually a resonance. It indicates which path, in this exact moment, is the most direct route to your next step. We often overlook this because the signal feels so ordinary. It doesn't always arrive as a life-changing epiphany. Sometimes it is just the subtle preference to sit in the sun or call an old friend. Yet the mechanism is consistent. This subtle nudge is the vibration of your true nature, acting as a compass for the physical mind. It is a constant broadcast, suggesting that the right choice is simply the one that contains the most light. The reason the flow disappears the moment we ignore the signal is simpler than we often imagine. This mechanism has been operating in your life the entire time, even when you weren't looking for it. Think of your reality as a radio. Every version of your life is already being broadcast on a different frequency. Your highest excitement, even in its smallest form, is the dial that tunes you into the most efficient path. When you follow a subtle nudge to do something simple, you are effectively switching channels. This is why the pattern behaves this way. By choosing the activity that contains even a spark more excitement than the others, you align yourself with a version of reality where things naturally work. Suddenly, the shift begins to make sense. Resistance appears because you are trying to operate on a frequency that doesn't match your current state. It is like trying to hear a broadcast on 98.5 when your dial is still set to 101.2. The friction isn't a punishment, it is a clear indicator of a mismatch. Following the signal, no matter how tiny, aligns the gears of your experience. This is the hidden rule behind the pattern. When you are in resonance with your excitement, the events that match that state are the only ones that can physically reach you. The mechanism is simple, but following it requires us to confront a deeply ingrained habit. Most of us have been taught that excitement is unreliable and that logic is the only safe harbor. This is where many of us lose the signal. The moment a quiet impulse arrives, the urge to take a walk or start a creative sketch, the analytical mind intervenes. We often mistake this resistance for wisdom or responsibility. We tell ourselves that being practical means ignoring the small stuff to focus on the big goals. How many times has caution silenced the signal of excitement in your own life? This is the moment the inner voice begins to argue, insisting that an action must have a guaranteed outcome before it is worth pursuing. We fear that if we follow a small nudge without a map, we will end up lost. But in reality, by waiting for certainty, we disconnect from the very compass that provides it. This internal friction is what creates the stagnation we feel later in the day. If you have ever noticed yourself talking your way out of a moment of genuine interest, I'm curious to hear what that inner dialogue sounds like for you in the comments. Moving past the internal resistance is not about a grand leap of faith. It is about a subtle shift in how you prioritize your next 5 minutes. The process is a simple form of navigation. First, look at the options available to you right now. Identify the one that contains even a tiny spark more excitement than the others. It doesn't have to be a life-changing project. It could be the simple urge to make a coffee or look out the window. Second, act on that excitement to the best of your ability. Follow it until you can take it no further, or until another option appears with even more resonance. This is where the navigation begins. The key is to act with curiosity rather than pressure, releasing any expectation of where the path should lead. This is how the signal becomes action. By following the breadcrumbs of interest, you allow the mechanism of alignment to steer your experience. How different would a day feel if you followed the signal instead of the fear? You will find that as you act on these small nudges, the next signal becomes clearer and the flow returns. If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing for more explorations into how consciousness and reality interact. The shift rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually begins in the middle of a mundane afternoon. Imagine you are working on a routine task when a sudden, quiet curiosity about an old hobby flickers in your mind. Normally, you would dismiss it as a distraction, but this time you follow the formula. You spend just 10 minutes researching a specific technique or looking at a related image. Later that day, you run into someone who mentions that exact topic, leading to an unexpected collaboration or a solution to a problem you've been stuck on for weeks. This is often how the shift begins. You might have already experienced similar moments without realizing their significance, dismissing them as mere coincidence. But notice the chain reaction: a small impulse, a simple action, and a sudden opening in your reality. The change doesn't require a total life overhaul. It only requires that you stop ignoring the breadcrumbs. Have you ever followed a small curiosity that led somewhere unexpected? When you look back, you can see that the signal was there all along, disguised as an ordinary thought. It is the mechanism of alignment, working through the smallest windows of your day. This suggests something remarkable about the nature of experience. We often assume that our life is a single, fixed track, and that we must work hard to build a future that doesn't yet exist. But when we look through the lens of these subtle signals, the perspective shifts. Suddenly, the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. It implies that every version of your life, every potential path, and every possible outcome is already present as a frequency within consciousness. In this view, excitement isn't something you are creating, it is something you are detecting. It is the resonance of a reality that is already active, calling to you through your own preferences. This changes the way we understand the experience of living. It means you are not a traveler trying to find a destination on a map. You are a radio receiver tuning into the broadcast that matches your true self. You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life. Those small, quiet nudges are the evidence that you are constantly interacting with a multidimensional structure. Could these signals be guiding us towards versions of ourselves we have not yet explored?
Every moment of interest is a bridge to a different timeline, suggesting that the life you seek is not something to be earned, but something to be tuned into. Perhaps the signal has been there all along, moving quietly beneath the surface of your routines. The patterns of flow and friction you've noticed are not accidents of fate, but reflections of a deeper dialogue between you and the world around you. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing. As you move through the next few hours, you may find yourself becoming aware of small impulses you once would have ignored. You might see the subtle rhythm of your own excitement appearing in the most ordinary places. How often have these moments appeared quietly in your life, only to be dismissed? By simply paying attention, you are already changing the way you participate in your reality. If you feel ready to explore the deeper mechanics of this alignment, the next chapter of this journey reveals how these subtle signals begin to reshape the very structure of your time and experience. It is a closer look at the hidden architecture of the realities we choose to inhabit.